Hi and welcome to Movies Suck. I was asked recently if I intended to review the BBC's new Dracula miniseries, and I must admit I didn't realise that it had already been on TV, as I rarely keep a close track on what the BBC is up to. After all, the odds are that they're just desecrating another intellectual property. Bram Stokers Dracula is one of those stories that is just so famous that it's been remade in one form or another since the novel was published in 1897. Some of those versions have been attempts at an accurate portrayal, and others have deviated so far from the source material that it's surprising that the name Dracula was even used. This is a review of the first of the three-part series, each episode of which is as long as an average movie, so be prepared that this does require some serious investment of time to actually watch. I will also endeavour to make this a spoiler-free review, as much as is possible. Now, I didn't expect much going into this, and I was in fact all ready to rip it to shreds for being horrifically woke and cringeworthy, and it is absolutely guilty of both of these offences in places. But as a whole, it's actually a fairly intriguing watch. It looks about right for the gothic late 1800s, and the acting from John Heffernan as the classic character of Jonathan Harker is very convincing, along with his co-star, I'm not sure how you pronounce this, Klaus Bang? Well, Danish guy named something rather Bang, who is both quite riveting and intriguing as the titular title character of Dracula. Unfortunately, there is also another co-star in this series who is extremely grating, and who seems to have been put in the show as the embodiment of the BBC and their painfully woke agenda. Her name is Agatha Van Helsing. Or should I say none Agatha Van Helsing. Just saying this grates on my nerves so hard that I can almost feel the knife twisting in the back of Bram Stoker himself. This series opens in a nunnery, where Jonathan Harker is recovering from his escape from Dracula's castle and is being interviewed by two nuns, one of whom is Agatha Van Helsing, who is supremely annoying and arrogant. Within the first few minutes of meeting her, she makes numerous jokes at Harker's expense, and you can't help but thinking that this woman is certainly not a nun. There is nothing good or godly about her. She is self-obsessed, arrogant, self-centered, a know-it-all, and careless in every way you can possibly imagine. She is in no way a heroic character. She's cruel, cutting, sarcastic, and seems to enjoy being mean just for the sake of it. At one point in the story, she is taunting Dracula himself in the most horrific and insulting ways possible, and doing everything she can to provoke him and make sure that he is very, very unlikely to leave her and her other nun friends alone. He can't just let these people get away with it. So it can't just let her get away with what she's done. And she does this taunting in a way that shows that she has no regard for anyone but herself. She is the very epitome of the modern, self-serving, self-obsessed leftist culture that has infested almost every area of modern life. I'm sure that she would be advocating the idea of euthanasia for old people, based on the idea that they have had their time and are no longer worth anything. They're just a drain on society because they're not young and will not have to endure the planet as long as those who are just entering university will. I mean, I challenge anybody to sit through her interview with Jonathan Harker and not become infuriated at her blasé attitude and sheer contempt for men in general. The writers of this character must be feminists of the very sickest third wave kind to have written this monstrosity. I mean, you know a supposedly heroic character has gone slightly wrong when you find yourself rooting for the evil vampire because he seems like a much nicer chap. This strongly contrasted with the characters of Jonathan Harker, who is shown throughout to be serious, conscientious, a devoted man who would never compromise what he believes and who comes to his convictions through slow and studious attention to detail, which makes his treatment even harder to stomach. And then we have Dracula himself. He's a very interesting character whose motivations are basically the same as the book. He simply wants to go to England because he wants a higher class of prey. And yes, I found that to be a curious thing for such a woke and gendered organisation as the BBC to endorse, that apparently English people are of a much higher quality than, in this case I guess, Romanian people. Very interesting. During the course of the episode, Dracula slowly becomes more and more dangerous, and his intentions towards Jonathan become starkly clear during a scene that is very emotionally charged and kind of hard to watch. I am actually finding myself engaged and interested in what is going to happen with this charismatic character in future episodes. But I have reservations, because it seems to me that the BBC is not interested in Dracula so much as they are interested in what Agatha will do next. And Agatha, as I am sure will become apparent, is very much in the Mary Sue line. Even when she does something that results in horrific deaths, she just says something along the lines of, "Oh, listening to them scream was my punishment," and then seems that we should just forget about that terrible event that she undoubtedly had a hand in causing. I haven't yet spoken about another of the story's main characters, and that is the character of Mina, who is Jonathan's bride-to-be, and a bit of a minx, or at least that's how her letters make her seem. She's an interesting character because through everything she stays true to Johnny Blue Eyes, as she calls Harker, and nothing seems to be able to dissuade her from her devotion, which is a very sweet thing, and yet another old-fashioned anathema for the BBC to have to deal with. A woman who puts her fiancé first, above everything, even to her own detriment? Hard on them, I know. It's the sort of thing that we find fairly commonly in real life, where a wife or girlfriend is so devoted to her husband or boyfriend that she'll support him even when all logic says that she should throw him under the bus. At least, that is the leftist agenda that we find perpetrated in modern times. I found her devotion quite moving, and being an old-fashioned kind of guy in many ways, I would be happy to see this quaint old-fashioned value supported and displayed more within the media. Unlikely these days, but we can but hope. Another thing that needs to be spoken of is the tone of the series. I looked on IMDb, and this series is described as a drama/horror, but that's only part of the story, because for some reason they've shoehorned in some very unlikely and out-of-place jokes, mostly by Agatha Van Helsing, who is a joke all on her own. Dracula himself cracks the odd joke, but they don't seem particularly out of place for him since he is a charismatic and likeable character. But it does leave you with the feeling that they couldn't decide on any particular direction for the series. Was it going to be a horror comedy, or a comedy drama, or was it really intended to be a drama/horror? And the jokes were just shoehorned in by some over-enthusiastic producer. It is hard to say, but it's certainly not a pure horror drama. Also, the ending of this first episode leaves a very bad taste in the mouth, as it seems apparent to me that a character who is pivotal to the original story is just simply killed off, which leaves a vacuum within the story that must be filled by someone. I have my doubts as to whether the character they end up using to fill the void will be half as good as any that Bram Stoker created. So, my conclusion, based on my viewing of this first episode, is that this is an interesting series, but with the caveat of so far. An interesting series so far, as I have a feeling that it's probably downhill from here on out. The BBC have an agenda to push, and while we all have high hopes for these classic stories, we are all well aware of how the BBC has changed in recent times, and should prepare for the worst. But hope for the best. God, I'm such a sucker. This is Movies Suck signing out. Leave a like, share, and subscribe, and I will catch you guys on the flip side.